Hello, 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 everyone. This is the King 2.0. Started thinking today about the inability of some people to generalize and the harm that that's causing society. And it made me think that, I haven't done a podcast in a bit, and it's something that I want to increase. So I thought yeah, I'm going to talk about this. So I'm going. Consider this. Think about this. Have you ever interacted with somebody? Um, and it can be about so many different things. That's part of the problem. Let's just say hypothetically, you were to say, yeah, so those Spanish people on the beach, the guys in Spain, they look really great in a bathing suit. They're just throwing up, and the guy says, well, not all Spaniards, they don't all look good in a bathing suit. You're like, well, no. Why would you think that? Well, because you just said Spaniards, Spanish people or whatever. Um, I mean, that's a real tame and lame example just to illustrate what I mean. Um, or let's say to step up the risk a little bit. You say a lot of homeless people, they don't really want to have homes. They're happy. Well, but not all of them. Well, no, just I was having a making a casual remark here, and I did say a lot, and so logic would imply that that's not all, right? And you can't go any further in the conversation because now all of a sudden you've been put on the defensive, and it's not your fault, it's their fault. They're stupid. They're just not they're just not bright individuals. And this can go on and on and on in a lot of different ways. Um, I'm going to give some concrete examples as we go forward. But one of the places where I think that we are seeing the toxic uh, results of some people's inability to generalize is if you talk about illegal immigration. And you know, let's just say for the sake of argument, that we're going to be like neutral on it, just for a half second at least. Uh, my point is, you can't even talk about it because you get into the conversation and suddenly gets bogged down by all these caveats and um, exceptions that they want you to consider before you can go further. So for example, the Trump administration tried to split the difference on this by saying that they were only going to go after the violent um, criminal offenders who were here illegally. And okay, I mean, that was a good effort. And then all of a sudden, what happened is you had a lot of cases where ICE would go in and um, they would go in after the violent one. So like they would get a tip, hey, we know that this guy, he's a rapist, he's a murderer, whatever. He's going to be at this spot, just that kind of idea. So they go in and they scoop him up. There's like 5 others that are there illegally as well, and they're not the wanted criminals. And so now the media is like, or media, yeah, I'm being nice here. The folks are like, well, wait a minute, I thought you were only going to go after the criminals, and well, there's a problem, isn't there? Because if you're here illegally, you are a criminal. I mean, there's federal law to that effect. So you if you wanted to have a conversation about illegal immigrants and try to make a distinction between those who are violent criminals and criminals, you really can't, because they're actually all, technically speaking, criminals, and therefore fair game. But this is a distinction that the liberals, the left, in particular, and the people, the moderates, some of them, the mental pygmies that I'm referring to, are they get hung up on this. They're like, well, we thought you were only going to go after the violent ones. The nice one down the street who smiles and says hola. Uh, we don't have any problems with that person. And you said you weren't going to go after them anyway, and then now you're deporting them. And so like you have a complete and total mental breakdown that occurs because of this attempt to parse generalities. So the problem with that is, if when you get right down into the brass tacks of things, and you force the issue and you say, okay, but they're here illegally, what's going to happen? They're going to, the other person will say, and I've heard this, I've seen this, I've witnessed this. They'll say, how can you act like that? Not all illegals are going to be like this. A lot of them they pay their taxes, their kids are in school or whatever. And it's like, I didn't say they all were, did I? No, that's not the point. The point is that nonetheless they're still criminals. Yeah, but they're very kind. They're hard workers. They do the jobs that Americans won't. How dare you say that all illegal aliens are criminals? You're like, okay, but I'm not trying to make a personal attack on them when I make this observation. I'm just speaking to their legal status, which is undeniable. I mean, and they turn it into like a personal thing. It's like an emotional type argument, and they always do the same thing. Well, they're not all like that, and they act like you're the ones saying that they are all like that. And no, I'm saying that's not relevant. So they completely miss the point. This spirals out of control, because that now you have a situation over the last 10, 15, 20 years where literally millions of people have come across the border illegally, and you can't even talk about that fact without some self-righteous chest thumper saying, well, they're not all bad. Well, no one said they're all bad, dumbass. That's not the point. So the harm, because then you can start getting into the harm of having all these people come in illegally to everybody else, into the systems, into the country. You never even you hardly get to that, because the conversation's been stopped. And most people are unable to go further than that. And then at the political level, of course, the political will to take action, it just, the energy for that just goes right out the window. So, yeah, that's kind of what I mean by mental pygmies. They read into things something that no sane person would ever actually be contending. So another way that this surfaces, well, I wanted to give you another example of a case where I thought that this went off the rails. And I have it up here. I don't know if you remember this. You guys remember George Zimmerman from two? I think the actual incident was in 2012. Right. This is the whole Obama. If I had a son. So, in case you are not familiar with this story, because it has been almost 14 years ago, that a lot of the viewers might actually, be too young for it. So, George Zimmerman was out um, policing his area, keeping an eye on things, and he saw a suspicious guy. So he calls the cops on it, and before the cops can get there, Trayvon attacks Zimmerman, and Zimmerman happens to be armed, and Zimmerman, in self-defense, shoots and kills Trayvon Martin. So, of course, the media is gonna. This is like the George Floyd thing, right? The media is gonna be all over this, and they're going to do everything that they can to whip this into a frenzy, of which there were really quite a few of those over the years. But one of the ways that this happened was the transcript of the 911 call was edited. Zimmerman would say maliciously by Embassy Today, and I think I have the right. Yeah. So here we go. Let me see if I can make this bigger so people can maybe see what I'm looking at here. There we go. So at the very top, you see this is the first. I'm trying to highlight it. I need to come over here. Here's where I'm quoting. The first edit says has Zimmerman say there's a real suspicious guy. A real suspicious guy. This guy looks like he's up to no good, or he's on drugs or something. He looks black. Okay. So then the next day, another one, the guy looks like he's up to no good, on drugs or something. He's got his hand in his waistband, and he's a black male. And then there's another one here. Zimmerman says he looks like he's up to no good. He looks black. Did you see what he was wearing? Yeah, dark hoodie. So Zimmerman here comes across as this just racist guy. He's happy to be racist on a 911 call. And then, as this website points out, the main problem right here, what all three edits have in common is that each hides that Zimmerman described Martin as black and as wearing a hoodie only in response to the 911 operator's questions about race and clothing. So the insinuation was that Zimmerman was just generalizing, right? He's just a racist. He just sees all black people the same. He looks black, so if they're black, he must be up to no good, right? He's basically being accused of generalization in a racial term, and then everybody just jumped on this. They just piled onto Zimmerman. They destroyed this guy's life, basically because of this clip, actually, because of this narrative that got spun. And Zimmerman he looks kind of white there, I suppose. He's actually Hispanic, actually, right? He's one of the good guys. But they began calling him when they in the news stories and stuff, they called him a white Hispanic, right? Really trying to heighten things. But you can see in the transcript here that he only used those terms because he was asked, right? So the dispatcher says Is this guy white, black, or Hispanic? Well, he looks black. Do you see what he is wearing? Yeah, dark hoodie. And then there's actually a few things on here. At the very bottom, finally, that's where we got the he's a black male. And so I would just like you to observe if we go back down here. So here's at the very end of the conversation, he's a black male, right? You see here on this part right here. I could have lined this up. So and he's a black male. This is on the second edit. And then he's got his hand excuse me. He's up to no good or doing drugs or something. Okay. So here's the last thing in the transcript. How far up do we have to go before you see this part? Let's see. He's up to no good or something. Let's see if we can find it here. Here we go. Okay. See all that parts that I highlighted? That's all the part of the sections of the 911 call that they deleted in order to splice together and get this sentence here. This guy looks like he's up to no good or on drugs or something. He's got his hand in his waistband and he's a black male. So totally railroaded this guy. So this inability to cope with generalizations was fanned into a racial hatred of white people in general. Because remember, Zimmerman, even though he was Hispanic, was called a white Hispanic. They made him sound like a white guy. But what are you supposed to do? Should the dispatcher have said, okay, we don't want to generalize. So is he a white guy with blonde hair, strawberry blonde, beach blonde? I said beach blonde, but is it maybe bleach blonded? We don't want to generalize here. Are we sure he has both of his ears? Is it possible he has one ear? Does he have blue eyes, brown eyes, yellow eyes, green eyes, whatever? And what if I'm the dispatcher going through all of this? I mean, that's ridiculous, right? What would it? But like the generalist, the person who's afraid to generalize would be like offended just by saying white guy. So what are you saying? All white people do this? Well, see, in real life, it's just a stupid, utterly asinine and ridiculous line of thinking, if we can call it thinking at all. Just because you're describing somebody and lumping someone into a category doesn't mean that you're saying that all the people who have those characteristics are all the same. That's just so stupid. Now, do people ever actually do that like in real life? And we have a logical fallacy called the hasty generalization. So, presumably the kind of thing does happen sometimes, and theoretically it does. But I would say, like, in real life, most of the time when the chips are down, we just generalize instinctively because we know that we have to. The pragmatics of the situation force us to, and this is a good case in point. He doesn't. He's asked, is he white, black, or Hispanic? He says he looks black. This is right here. He doesn't feel compelled to go on and more nuance. It looks like he has a goatee. He's wearing one earring. Because, going into all these details to make sure that no one gets the impression he thinks all black people are like this, which I guess in retrospect, maybe George Zimmerman should have said that. When the dispatcher said, is this guy white, black, or Hispanic? Zimmerman should have said, I'm not saying this about all people. I'm sure there are exceptions, and there's many, many fine people who are not. But this particular person looks to be black. maybe then, maybe then he could have been spared the ritual humiliation that he was exposed to. We hear these kinds of things really all the time. And as I said, they really they end the conversation. And so I would say that the problem is not that people generalize too much. It's that the the reluctance to be accused of generalizing has caused people to refuse to talk about things at all, because as soon as they issue any kind of a generalization, they're crucified. So they just don't talk. To be able to generalize is actually a mark of intelligence. It means that you are able to um, categorize things, to take general attributes and form um, compartments of like kinds in it for the purposes of accurate communication. Because ultimately, in the end, there is no escaping generalization. You have to generalize literally for everything. Everything that you say is a generalization in some part. You say, well, what do you want for dinner? Well, the person who is the anti-generalist would say, well, there are other kinds of meals. I mean, why not ask about breakfast or lunch or supper or brunch? Right? No, we kind of have to narrow it down. Um, I guess in the South, dinner would be at lunchtime. Um, maybe we'll say supper just to sort of get ourselves out of that fight that's about to start. Um, supper is a meal that we have usually in the evening, and that helps us to have a conversation and communicate, right? If we got bogged down on all the different words that we have for all the different times of meals, we would never find out what the hell you want to eat for supper when you come home from work, right? And then if you say, well, what do you what do you like to eat? Well, I like chicken. Well, what about steak? Don't you like steak? This is this is the mental pygmy, right? Now we don't. Most people aren't like this in real life. That's kind of my point. Like in the real world, when sanity is allowed to poke through, we sort of breeze through these things um, pretty easily. But you'd have to be a really dumb, stupid person to get all bent out of shape if someone were to make categories for supper or food preferences. And likewise, you'd have to be pretty unintelligent if you're unable to draw distinctions, make comparisons, and uh, create mental compartments for the hot button issues that we deal with in the world. No one thinks that every illegal alien is a bad person. As I said before, that's not really the relevant question. We can actually assume that they're all very nice, decent people, if that was the point. But it is unfortunately true that, as matter of generalities, if someone's willing to break some laws at the beginning of their relationship with the United States, the odds are a little bit higher that they're going to be willing to break some laws a little bit further along, especially if they continue to break laws, say rape people a whole bunch of times and get let out. They're going to rape again, right? Now, I have to say, right? Because this is the world that we're in, that I'm not talking about all of them, right? I know that's where your instinct was. Well, they don't all do that. No, that's my point. No, of course not. But if I have to spend 5 minutes giving the caveats and all these assumptions or modifications to the who I'm talking about, we would never talk about anything. We would never get anywhere, and so we wouldn't be able to talk about the people who do rape people 5 times, get out of jail, murder again, and just do it over and over again. Um, and a lot of them happen to be illegal aliens. Yeah, it just seems to be true. And then like as soon as I say that, like I've had conversations, so I that are kind of like in this vicinity. So I know this is like there are people who are like, well, Native Americans, excuse me, when I say Native Americans, I mean actually like American citizens. Um, normal America, how do I say it right without like violating the mental pygmies, self-righteous shield? um, Legal American citizens sometimes rape and murder too. Yeah, I know, but the difference is they have a right to be here intrinsically, and those other people, we had a choice whether or not they would be here. They didn't have to be here. If they weren't here, they would not have done the thing that they did. So why make things even more difficult? Now I'm kind of going on and on and on about the illegal alien example because it is kind of um I mean it's a really good example of the kind of thing that I'm talking about. But I want to go into another example here. And I see that I'm closing in on 30 minutes. I don't know how long people feel like watching these things, but I kind of feel like 30 to 45 minutes is kind of the max. So there's this something that came up a while ago here. This is just this is astonishing. This just happened not too long ago. Hold on just a second here. All right. Let's see here. I should be able to hear this when I play it. Let me get me out of the way here. All right.
We were born and raised in New York, and we want everyone here to stay in New York. You don't get to come from outside and then tell everyone else. We were born and raised in New York, and we want everyone here to stay in New York. You don't get to come from outside and then tell everyone else.
Okay, so the funny thing is all right, so here we don't want to violate the same failure to get caught up in generalizations. This guy here, so here's what you just saw. So this guy was at a event, and he was protesting. He was a counter protest at a protest about Islamification or Islamicism, or there's a lot of different ways of saying it, but I would not say they were straight up anti-Muslim, but they definitely don't like the idea of taking American culture and giving a Muslim flavor to it. Okay, so this guy says, we welcome everyone into this city. And then as he's talking, a guy who sympathizes with ISIS comes and throws a bomb over his shoulder, right? So the irony is rich. We want everyone to be welcome in this city. And he's talking about the Muslims, and then a Muslim throws a bomb, right? So, but the thing is, he stands by it, right? He stands by it. He says it right here. I stand by it. Everyone is welcome. So he's embracing the generalization. Everyone is welcome except for Jake Lang, the guy who was leading the event. Okay. So you would think, like in a situation like this, that he would have the good sense to say, okay, but I wasn't necessarily endorsing the people who would throw bombs. You know, that if I was going to clarify what had happened, I think that's what I would have said. You know, but the problem is that people are so wound up about generalizations that they can't even have a conversation about the realities about the kinds of violence that the Islamic ideology has generated historically and currently. The examples of this are legion, and that people are there. Any kind of a criticism whatsoever of any kind of Islamic kind of thing, you're gonna have two responses. One response is going to be, well, not all Muslims are like that. You know, this is just this is just the exception. This is just the outlier. That'll be one. I'm having a podcast. Yeah, I have people circulating around me. So that's one response. They're not all like that, and so I guess we can't talk about the ones that are. I guess. Or they'll say, the other common was, oh, well, but other ideologies also have historically generated violence. So a good example with the Muslim example is, well, look at the Crusaders. I've actually heard this many times, dozens of times probably. And so you're talking about like the people from 600 years ago. 600 years ago, this is your example of the Christian violence. Oh, well, there's people who acted violently as Christians after that. Well, I mean that's true, but like you said, the Crusaders, that was your go-to example. I mean, do you have anything more recent? I mean, why are we even talking about that? I mean, if we want to talk about the violence that Christians commit in the name of their religion today, we can have that conversation. Most sane and reasonable people would object to that. It's a little bit harder to find examples of it, but you still can find examples of it, and most people would say, yeah, the Christian who did X, Y, and Z, that was bad. We don't want that. We condemn that. So it's just a little weird that in order to condemn Muslim violence, first we have to go through the whole gamut. We also have to condemn Christian violence, Hindu violence, Shinto violence, American Indian violence, Black violence, Hispanic violence. I guess we just got to go through them all before we're allowed to talk about the Muslims who are violent and show up at an event, they're so mad that people are saying Muslims are bad that they decide to throw a bomb. I mean, come on, that's funny, right? I mean, yes, the Muslim was so offended that they called him violent that he went and beheaded someone. I mean, I mean, that's almost the level of ridiculousness that we reached here. I mean, come on. But generally, I shouldn't say generally speaking. I know this whole thing is about generalizations. Um, See, I fall into it as well because I just know, like I've done this for so long. I know that people's ears are like, "Oh, he's generalizing. He's generalizing." If he doesn't say he's generalizing, then I'm gonna jump all over him. So you have to put those words in there because you always have this basically a person who's got the intellect of a 3-year-old who's gonna say, "Well, that's just a generalization." Well, yeah, dumbass, it was. Welcome to the English language, where we have to generalize all day long about just about everything that we say. every Almost just every word is a generalization. Um, I just did it now. Anyway, um, so there was a lot of things that was fascinating about this. So you got a guy who is standing there saying we want to welcome everyone in the city, and then someone throws a bomb over his head. And then he goes and he says, but I stand by that comment. Everyone is welcome except for the guy who is protesting against people who throw bombs. It just I just and he calls them fascists, of course. That's what they always are. So then immediately after this, because you had a group that I have a direction that I'm taking this. Well, I don't know if I will. Well, no, I will. So then, of course, the mayor has to talk about this because this happened outside the mayor's house. And I'll just play the first 30 seconds here. Make sure the sound works.
On Saturday, a protest was held outside Gracie Mansion, where I live with my wife, Rama. Neither of us were home at the time. This was a vile protest rooted in white supremacy entitled Stop the Islamic Takeover of New York City.
Okay. Yeah. So, so this is what I mean about the toxic ramifications of being unable to generalize. So this guy being Mamdani, the current new mayor of New York City, sees a protest again that the basic core of the protest is we don't want an ideology to be rooted in our country that is prone to oppression of women, suppression, dominance. You're allowed to have 4 wives. I don't remember all the rules anymore. But you get 72 virgins if you blow yourself up. So that's always, that's nice, I guess. They are known for, well, I don't need to go into it. I mean, the point is that there are very valid and legitimate reasons to be concerned about a heavily saturated Islamic ideology in an American city, right? You can be concerned about that, but because Mandami is unable to grasp nuance, what is his first? What does he call it in the first sentence or two? Well, it's rooted in white supremacy, right? So that's his generalization. He leaps from because he is unable to accept certain generalities derived from the Islamic ideology. He leaps to his own, which is that anyone who is opposed to that ideology must be a white supremacist. And there we go. That's why you can have millions of people believing that conservatives are literal Hitlers, because these brain dead people are unable to. They think, like Mandani thinks, and these people that I'm talking about, they think that we think that all Muslims are bad people, that all illegal aliens are bad people, that all black people are bad. They think that we think that, and then they draw the conclusion that, well, we must be literally Nazis then. But of course, we don't think that because we're not idiots. You know, we understand the world and how it works, and we understand that in order to have a conversation, you have to lump some things together and convey concepts and categories and compartments. Otherwise, you would get nowhere. Now, in his defense, when I first saw this, and I'm going to get off of this in just a minute here. When I first saw this video, I only listened to the first 30 to 45 seconds of it, and just shook my head. But I will give him credit when before going into this podcast, I thought I should listen to a little more, get a little more context. And he does, unlike the other guy, Walter Masterson. Unlike that guy, he actually does say, and I'm paraphrasing, we condemn violence. People have a right to protest. It's okay to protest. No, you don't deserve to have bombs thrown at you just for protesting, things of that sort. So I will give him credit for that. Like the initial news flash on this was that he just blames the way that it came off was that he basically was making it sound like the anti-Muslim protesters had it coming and they deserved to get bombed, kind of a thing. He did not. I mean, I didn't agree with a lot of it. I'm glad that he said that. I think it was a respectful and respectable and responsible thing to say. I mean, don't get me wrong here. I don't want people to take from my generalization that I approve of everything that he said. See how stupid we have to get if we don't accept generalities in our conversations? Like, I have to make this caveat. Yes, I'm glad that he said that, but that doesn't mean that I believe everything and agree with everything that he said. Like, do you really have to say that every time someone comes and talks to you? Like, you're sitting at supper and the person across, maybe you go out to a meal and they're like, hey, I was thinking about going to Florida, but it's kind of warm this time of year. Well, not all the time. Actually, sometimes it's quite cool, even in Florida at this time of year. I'm like, dude, how big is your brain anyway? Like, does a gnat have a bigger one? I mean, why are you so dumb? So, I know, I just got roped into it myself again. Like, I just triggered myself. Holy crap. Anyway, so Mandani did save himself a little bit here. And it's a good example of why, it's good to look at more context. Meanwhile, it's worth showing you guys this before I move on. So this is CNN's initial reporting about this bombing. 2 Pennsylvania teenagers crossed into New York City Saturday morning for what could have been a normal day, enjoying the city during abnormally warm weather. But in less than an hour, their lives would drastically change as the pair would be arrested for throwing homemade bombs during anti-Muslim protest outside of Mandami's home. Here's what we know so far. So, like, in this telling of it, 2 teenagers, they went on a walk, and like, if you just take this for what it sounds like, they were arrested for throwing homemade bombs, but like, it makes it sound like, maybe falsely arrested. Like, they were just minding their own business, and then all of a sudden the police jumped on them for no reason that we can understand. But maybe when we get more information, we'll find out. So this again is why millions of people walk around thinking that half of America is literally Hitler, right? So they're going to see this headline, and CNN removed it but they're not these low information voters. They're not going to know it was removed, right? Because they don't follow it close enough, and they will just be left with the impression that these two innocent teenagers were arrested for throwing homemade bombs, and they probably didn't. We don't really know. So anyway, this was removed, and in point of fact, I have a nice article here talking about this. And so now I want to transition just a little bit. I think I've made it pretty clear that I think that I'll just kind of sum up my contention. We typically hear people talk as if you generalize, you're not a good thinker, and I'm saying it's the exact opposite. If you can't generalize, you're not a good thinker. Now, you can make bad generalizations or hasty generalizations, of course. But if you can't generalize, you can't communicate. That's just the bottom line. And sometimes I think it's intentional to end a conversation. And sometimes I think just people are just so brain dead. They just I'll come back to this. I'll come back to that. So anyway, no, I'm gonna go into it right now so that I can talk about this, which I think is pretty important in its own. I think actually one of the reasons why we have this strange instinct in our culture to say, well, they're not all like that. How dare you lump them all together? Even if you didn't. And even if you did, again, you have to do it to some degree in order to have a conversation. I think some of it is actually a stand-in for a moral self-righteousness. They're basically moral prigs, is what they are. They think they're better than you, is what they are. They think that they're the ones coming and defending the victims. So like if you because it's a subgroup that's getting singled out for criticism or something. So like if you've got a situation which happens, this probably happened to, the number of people who have been killed by illegal immigrants is well into the hundreds at this point. You can't talk about those victims. Like they literally don't care about them because it's just not a victim group that they care about. But by advocating and coming to the instinctive defense of this larger victim group, the so-called misunderstood illegal immigrant who's actually a nice and decent guy, and he's not like all the other ones. Yeah, I know that he ran somebody down while they were out jogging and raped and murdered them, but they're not all like that. And then use that to go on a defense for the 20 to 30 million people who are here illegally. Somehow the many hundreds of usually women who are murdered by illegals, not a peep. Like how do we explain that? And I think the way that we explain that is ultimately, and for a lot of them, they just think it's the moral thing to do. If there is a victim, anyone and all you have to do is criticize them and they become a victim. This is how they show that they are morally superior to you. And I think that's a huge part of it. And it's obviously a very dangerous component, because if you think that you have the moral high ground all the time in that way, again, this is why they can think that half of America are literally Nazis, right? They actually, I'm not using hyperbole, folks. This is not a false generalization. They actually think this. They go out there and find someone and all they do is watch ABC news in the evening hour and ask them what they think about a Trump voter. Talk to them long enough, maybe give them a little bit of wine, and sure enough, you're going to find out that they're pretty sure they're all fascists. They might actually be the next Hitler. And boy, we better do something about it right away. But it's not because I don't think a lot of it is because of the generalization part. I think that's sort of like the symptom of the disease. The bigger disease is they're just moral hypocrites. They pick and choose which victim groups that they're gonna like, and if you're not in the favored victim group, then you're toast. I mean, who cares about you? And if you speak up in defense of those ones, well, you're the racist, right? You're the white supremacist. See how it works? I saw a really interesting video. See if I can find it here real quick. It's not critical, but I'll see if I can find it here real quick, just so you guys can look it up later. This is an Iranian who is who's been documenting the well, a lot. I mean, he's not new to the scene, but I found him because he's been documenting the Iran war, and I was interested in um, getting into perspective of Iranians. And so, if I can just find it here, he had a conversation about what's going on in the UK, and he had some British comedians come on. I think was it this one? It may have been this one that you can see here in the middle. IRGC plot to take over. Here, let's just click on it real quick.
TV, this is your global news.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. So he actually talks about this incident in New York City and gives a perspective as an Iranian who has to cope with being ruled by an actual Islamic ideology, which I think tends to color one's viewpoint. It's interesting the things that you're allowed to say in a country which is supposedly dominated by Christian values compared to the things that you're not allowed to say inside an Islamic society, right? I mean, Christian society is so bad, so noxious, but you're allowed to say it. Try that in Iran. But the irony is, try that in the UK. You'd be arrested in the UK too. So crazy. Anyway, so I wanted to make that point that I think that so much of this is really just derived from the pompous, snobbish, arrogant, condescending, moral, uppity atmosphere that a lot of these people have. And yeah, actually generally they do tend to be liberals, progressives for sure. Sorry, but it's just the case. So I want to talk about this story. So they're getting into this, goes back to the New York thing, but I wanted to take a minute and it's wow, I've gone over my 45 minutes. All right, well I'll try to, I don't know, we'll see how brief I actually keep it. This is actually on the Daily Mail, which is a British site, and it's crazy that I had to go away I could not find this I did not hear this information on American mainstream, right? CNN did not cover this. They're too busy covering the nice teenagers out for a stroll. But the UK was able to give up me the scoop. So because I was a little bit curious about how we knew that they were ISIS. I had heard that, and I'm like, well, why do we think that? So it turns out, and you can find this article here. There's the headline. So it's on the Daily Mail website, so you can find it yourself. It's a bunch of stuff about the parents that I'm not sure are going to be irrelevant, but here, see if I can find the. Hey, that's not working. Come on, Control F, work for me. Stupid pop-up. Here it is. Okay, so when this guy was arrested, and there's lots of interesting things in here. One of them was asked if he wanted to kill people like the 2013 Boston Marathon. And he says, no, even bigger than that. The other guy says, all praise is due to Allah, Lord of all worlds. I pledge my allegiance to the Islamic State. Die in rage, you kafar. Then he says, according to the complaint, this isn't a religion that just stands when people talk about the blessed name of the prophet. We take action. Okay, so first of all, this is not a generalization if when we say that this is like a Muslim extremist. It's not a false characterization to say this guy was an ISIS sympathizer. And how do we know this? Because he says, I pledge allegiance to the Islamic State. That's how we can know that, right? If you don't know what the kafar is, that's kind of like the word given to the dirty non-believers, and you can kind of do anything that you want with them because they're not believers. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself a little bit, but so let's go back to the stage here. I guess I need to go back to this part here. This isn't a religion that just stands when people talk about the blessed name of the prophet. We take action. This isn't a religion that just stands. So he himself is telling you what Islam is like, right? The Muslim himself is telling you what it's like. And what they're saying is you cannot protest Islam without getting a grenade thrown on your head, right? It's not a religion. His characterization, his generalization, that is going to do nothing if people talk about the blessed name of the prophet. In fact, should I even say the prophet's name on this podcast, or will I also be marked for death? Legit question, right? In fact, I don't think this article the name of the son is Muhammad. They don't tell us the name of the prophet, probably on purpose. Anyway, so you have a anti-Muslim protests, and the reason why they don't like Muslims is because they think it's bad for people to believe that you can kill them if they are kafar. And then you've got the liberal in the middle who's like, I have no problem with this. We welcome everyone except for the people who protest against the people who want to bomb. And I bet you if we asked him, why are you standing by your comment? He would say, well, they're not all bombers, right? So we're back to where we began. Of course, they're not all bombers. We know that. But what's the religion like? What does religion say? What does the Quran say? Surely that bears some influence on how we're going to perceive this, how we're going to form these categories, right? This is what I mean about how an intelligent person has to generalize. And an intelligent person, when he is going to form these categories, for example, about Islam in this particular case, he's going to go and he's going to, the reason why he speaks the way that he does, and with the most precision, with increasing precision as he does, is by actually finding out about what the religion is, especially according to the people who adhere to the religion. And yeah, there are exceptions. You have to say that, right? Because we're talking to, this whole video is geared towards mental pygmies who can't generalize. So I have to give the caveat. triggered myself again. Settle down. So the guy himself identifies his religion as one that is not going to stand for protest. So you basically have this confluence of craziness. You've got the people who are willing to kill. You got the people who are ready to defend the people who are willing to kill and attack the people who are against the people who are willing to kill. I have trouble even saying that. And then this is the attitude of the entire Western world at this point. How can this end well? It can't end well. And what's required is for people to start forming these categories in their minds and having the stones, the kahunas, to defend those categories and start calling out the people who are like, well, they're not all like that. And just start saying, yeah, well, dumbass, we know that. Now let's get on to what we're talking about here. Okay, I've said all that I want to say about that, but I do want to say, just as a side point, it's a side point from the point of view of this video, is that it turns out that these guys here, they focus on one here, the Muhammad dude. This couple from Afghanistan apparently is very wealthy, and this guy, the one who is talking here, who said all that stuff, he's not like a oppressed young man. He's not the victim that the left says that all the Muslims are. They act like in their minds, the victims are always they're poor, they're oppressed, they're being pushed down or held down. No, this family was not. This family was living the American dream. This kid is rich, kind of like the 9/11 attackers, ironically, which is actually kind of my point. So what we do need to have a conversation about, if we can get past all this other chaff, is how so many times the most dangerous extremists within an ideology are actually the second and third generation kids. They're not the first generation. A lot of times those first generation people, when they come over to America or to Britain or wherever, they know what they left. They are so glad to be out from the thumbs of those regimes. And you're not going to be able to tell those people, like that 2C TV guy that I showed before here, that guy. I don't know all of his story, but I can assure you, just from what I have listened to him so far, he is happy that the Iranian regime is being brought down right now. No love lost there, because it sucks, right? And so the first generation that comes over tends to have an innate reaction to the horrors that they left, that drives them to moderate even their Islamic views. And I am generalizing. But I think what happens in some of these second and third generation folks is that there's a collapse of identity, so to speak, that gets married to their embrace of the ideology kind of at the same time. So they're cut loose. A lot of times they're extended families overseas. They don't get to see them. And they're in America. They're skin might be a little bit different. They feel like they're outsiders, so on and so forth. And they begin wondering, who am I? What's important? What's real? What do I believe in? And things like that. And a lot of them are going to return to whatever their ideological roots were. And so they begin reading the Quran for the first time, really. and they take it far more seriously, I think, than their parents do. Or they take it without the moderating adjustments that life under a real Islamic regime forced upon them. So, like their parents, they might be devout Muslims, but they don't like having their hands cut off, and they didn't like seeing Aunt Betsy have her throat slit because she refused to wear the burqa. So they're gonna stay firm to the Quran um, in Islam, but they're not going to take it too far because they've had those experiences. They've seen it with their own eyes. They watch the gays be thrown off of buildings, for example. Their kids and their grandkids have not seen that, so they don't know that, and so they can't counterbalance what they're learning from their Quran with something else to hold them back. And so that's why I think um, there's actually been many examples like this where it's the second and third generations that are the real problem. Um, I don't know if we should I don't know if that's the way I'd want to say it, because obviously some first generation folks have been causing quite a lot of problems, for example, in Germany and um, some of the Nordic countries as well. So I'll say instead that people that we would not expect to be causing problems end up still causing quite a lot of problems. Like this kid is rich, and yet he still is ready to try to kill as many people as that he can, just because someone has slandered the prophet. Well, this is America. People are slandering the prophet all the time. I mean, you would never stop killing people if that was like your standard. Like every time someone slandered the prophet, you would have to go kill them. I mean, you'd get no rest. I mean, you'd have to get yourself jacked up on cocaine and just go nuts forever. Because like I said, it's America. And that's kind of what the anti-Muslim protest was kind of about. Like, we would much prefer to not have a city where that is filled with people who thinks that it's appropriate to go and kill the people who offend you. Why would we want that? And so then, as we wrap this up, we return again to the other category of people that I talked about. I said there would be two kinds of responses typically that I've seen. The one is the, well, they're not all like it, and the other one is the whataboutist. Well, what about the Christians? I already went through all of this. Usually it's the Christians. We don't, for some reason, we don't want to talk about the Buddhists in our comparison either. Presumably because I'm a Christian, and so I guess that's what gets thrown at me. But that we can take it as it comes, right? What we can do is we can look at the ideology and the details of the ideology and ask ourselves, okay, is there anything in Christianity that would lead us to think that that's like acceptable behavior? And there really isn't, which is why usually when we find a Christian engaging in violence in the name of Christ, we condemn it. Now I ask you, when is the last time that you heard of someone engaging in violence in the name of Christ? Put it in the comments. I'd be glad to hear all 5 examples from the last 20 years. And then we can just add it to the Crusades from 600 years ago, and we'll have a nice little list going as our counterbalance. The point is you can take these things independently. You don't have to always compare them to other things. You've got a religion here that the Quran it's written. Go read it. Just take it at its word. Just do that. Okay. Now some of the other examples I've given in this podcast, it's not ideology per se, but we could possibly find ways to think of it in those terms. I'm talking about like the illegal aliens. Obviously, well, forget it. This is I'm an hour and 10 minutes, and I said at the beginning that I didn't want to talk that long, and yet I've gone and done it. No one's going to watch this. If you are still watching this at this point, you are amazing. You are a better person than I am. You probably actually are a morally superior person. And I tip my hat to you. So that's it. I'm done. I'm calling it. We're over. I'm the Philosopher King 2.0. Ending this train wreck in progress. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.